thing I've been missing most with my gym being closed is having access to a set of dumbbells. I think it's one of the harder things to replicate working out at home. I couldn't believe how expensive dumbbells are to buy online, not to mention most places are out of stock. We use dumbbells a ton training for the decathlon back in college. Fun fact, this is me here winning the 1500 at the Pac-10 Decathlon Championships, and the guy right behind me is the world record holder, Ashton Eaton. Okay, yeah, he beat me in all 9 other events pretty easily, but how about that 15, huh? I'm cutting the plates for the dumbbells out of remnant pieces of 1/2-inch plate. Once I got them trimmed down to fit on the CNC plasma table, I measured and redrew the same shape in the spire so I could use the automatic nesting feature to fit as many of the plates on it as I could. This was my first time cutting plate this thick on the table, and I learned it takes a little bit more babysitting than the thinner stuff. I had to chip away the splatter from the initial pierce, which a couple times knocked the torch head off when it came back around. I also had to change consumables mid-sheet at least once. This was a lot of cutting, and the cut quality started dropping quick at a certain point if I didn't. But once I figured out my process with the heavier plate, I was really happy with how I was cutting, and I made steady progress. Each dumbbell had a different diameter plate, so I marked each one before pulling them off the table. The thing that made this project possible for me is that I found all the metal I needed at the scrapyard, which was a fraction of the cost of having to buy it new. I just had to be okay with working with odd remnant shapes and cleaning up a layer of rust, which is no biggie. I realized that if I cut some plates in half, I could fit quite a few more around the outside and really minimize the waste. I just welded them back together and plan on putting them on the inside of the stack of plates on each dumbbell. I chipped off the slag on each plate and hit both sides with the wire brush on the grinder again. It was hours of cutting, and I was very excited to cut the last plate. It came out to 420 plates in total, which I calculated to be a total cut length that would travel from here to the moon and back 3 times. The plasma cutter leaves a bevel in all the cut edges, which isn't that big of a deal on the outside cut, but on the inside, it's not going to let me slide it over the shaft unless I hone it out a little bit. And that's why I got this big reamer, which I've never used before, but I'm hoping does the trick to clean out the inside and let it slide over the shaft. But I'm thinking that in order to use the reamer, I'm gonna have to build a vise to hold the plates while I drill it in the drill press. It took a long time, just like everything else on this project, but the reamer worked great. Once I got my routine down, I think I could do a plate every 30 seconds or so, So the better part of this day was podcasts and reaming. I found the 1¼ shaft for the handles at the scrapyard as well. I got the rust cleaned off them and then cut them to length on the bandsaw. It was a little more complicated than I initially thought it would be to figure out the needed diameter for each dumbbell, because as soon as you add another plate, the handle gets a little longer, which the weight of needs to be subtracted from the diameter of plates. I ended up putting together a calculator in a spreadsheet that once I input the plate thickness and the handle diameter, all I had to do was update the number of plates I wanted each dumbbell to have, and it would automatically calculate the volume of each cylinder and in turn the diameter needed to match the weight. I worked on adjusting the number of plates so there'd be a gradual increase in size from the smallest to the biggest dumbbell. I turned the bevels in on each other so it'd be more peaks and valleys instead of a Christmas tree, if that makes sense. I recessed the handle in 1/8 of an inch to minimize the amount the weld protruded on the outside. I always made sure the outside plates were perpendicular on both axes before clamping the plates tightly and welding the inside. I rounded over the outside and inside sharp edges, which was sped up a ton with a cheap rotary stand. And to make sure the inside plates would be secure and wouldn't rotate on the handle, I notched a groove across each side and filled it with a weld. I was really happy with how accurate the weights were, especially once I switched the scale from kilograms to pounds. They were all within a pound of the target weight, which is definitely close enough for me and my home gym. The dumbbells were ready to head off to the powder coaters, which is a great time for me to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Ariat. I'm really excited about this sponsor. Ariat is the go-to brand in my book for work clothing and boots. The thing I like most about Ariat is that they put the functionality of the work clothes first. It's got to be well made and ready to hold up to whatever it faces during the workday. Ariat puts a lot of design work into making sure their clothing doesn't impair your movement in any way by adding just the right amount of stretch, greater arm mobility seam construction for maximum range of motion, and venting to keep you cool on a hot day. It's so easy to see they have the top priority of making the best clothing for the job above all else, and then the fact that the clothing all looks so nice is just a big bonus. I'm not sure if I should say this or not, but when we lost power and heat after a big ice storm here recently, I wore this coat to bed. I mean, it's that comfortable, and somehow also made of flame-resistant fabrics that hold up great on the farm and in the barn. I could go on and on about Ariat. Honestly, it's the brand I was wearing on the farm long before I even knew what YouTube and sponsorships were. I hope you'll check them out, and there's a link in the description to get 10% off your first order. Thanks, Ariat. While the dumbbells were getting powder coated, I started in on making a flat bench and a seated bench, which is what I found myself using the most at the gym. I recessed slots for T-nuts into the 3/4 inch Baltic birch seat backing and rounded over the edges. I notched 3" by 2" tubing for the benches on the plasma table, and I thought I might as well mark cut lines while I was at it, which was handy. I notched the tubing so the weight would transfer all the way through to the floor, which I thought would be a little stronger joint. I capped the open ends and then cut some tabs that the backing boards will bolt through. I figured my best chance of getting them lined up with the T-nuts was to bolt them in place and give them a tack before removing the board and clamping it all down to the welding table to be fully welded. I repeated everything for the seat. I picked up a roll of black vinyl with the hopes of sewing my own seat covers. Kelly sewed one for me and gave me some great tips, and after that I had to give it a shot as well. I actually really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. If you didn't look too close, I think my seams are somewhat passable. And I think this is now officially Ariat's first sewing video sponsorship. I used 1" thick Brebond foam, which I think is pretty standard for exercise equipment padding. I pulled the vinyl tight and stapled the snot out of it. I added a little bit of light backing to cover the wood and finish it off. Lastly, I added some rubber end covers to the legs and a couple of rollerblade wheels to make the benches easy to move. The last thing to build for this project was a 2-tiered rack for the dumbbells. I cut 5 uprights and molded some feet onto them. I was getting ready to drill a ton of holes in the angle that the dumbbells will sit on, and thought I might be able to do it and sit on the CNC table, using a couple drill press vices to hold the angle upright. It worked really well and saved a lot of time. I think it was 160 holes I was going to have to drill. I had to add a table extension to weld on the outside 2 uprights. Thank you, forklift. Once it was all welded up, I hauled it up to the farm shop to give it a coat of paint, along with a couple other farm projects I was working on at the time. Painting party. God, I hate painting. While the paint was drying, I started milling the saddles that the dumbbells will sit in out of 1-inch UHMW. I first did a roughing pass to remove the bulk of the material, then I switched to a ball nose bit to do this finishing pass, which makes it nice and smooth. Lastly, I used an end mill to countersink bolt holes and cut the outer profile of each block. Each dumbbell needed 2 saddles, so I had to make 80 in total. I finished up the rack just in time to get the dumbbells back from powder coating. It felt like Christmas to me unwrapping the dumbbells. The powder coaters highly recommended using a polycoat instead of a regular powder coat, which they said would be less prone to chip and would hold up better. I think they turned out great. The polycoat has just a slight rubber feel to it, which felt nice to touch, and I think will help out with grip a little bit. A lot nicer than regular hardened glossy powder coating for this application. I fired up the most impressive piece of CNC equipment I own and cut some masking stencils. taped everything off, hoping to keep the white spray paint off my new matte black polycoat. With all the weights marked, they were ready to get racked up. I was really happy with the size of the weights. I think since I used solid steel, which is quite dense, the overall size of the dumbbells were a bit smaller than comparable dumbbells made out of other materials. Kelly has a pair of 10-pound dumbbells that are plastic filled with sand. I think they're about the same size as the 50-pound pair. The weights are nice and balanced and not unwieldy at all. I've always hated messing around with stacking loose weights for dumbbells because I love being able to quickly go from one lift to another, keeping my heart rate up. So I know it's a huge luxury having every weight in 5-pound increments like this, but I think it'll really increase the value of the set for me. This is a huge project, and I don't know if I quite knew what I was getting into when I started, but I enjoyed working on it a lot, and I love getting to learn some new skills along the way, like sewing the seat covers, something I might use in the future on other things. The dumbbells should be fairly indestructible, at least lasting the rest of my life. I mean, if the barn were to burn down, I'd just go dig these out of the rubble and keep using them. I wonder if I'll be as sore after using them for the first time as I am after finishing making them. I think it's time to find out.